Welcome to our City Board of Directors meeting for January 14, 2020. This is our opportunity to review our agenda for our formal board meeting that will be held on February 4th, 2020. Today we'll have a city presentation. Mr. Moore, if you would, please help us welcome, not necessarily welcome, but say our gratefulness and appreciation to Mr. Kenny Scott.
Thank you, Mayor and members of the board. This is one of these rare days, and really in the history of the city. I started going back trying to come up with the number of individuals that have served this city for 50 years. And it is a very rare club. I know Chief Reuben Webb, and there was someone over in Public Works that we're still trying to figure out. But it really is rare, and I met Kenny when I came to work here as an intern, and he's always been just a tremendous professional, tremendous person, and so it really is bittersweet to see him leave. His first day with the city was February the 2nd, 1970, and his last day will be February the 3rd of 2020. He said his favorite memory of working for the city was being promoted to my current position as code enforcement supervisor. And his plans for retirement include continuing to pastor the Greater Mount Carmel Baptist Church and spend more time fishing and traveling. We also have a very rare time today. We have somebody here that worked with Kenny for close to 40 years probably, and that's his former boss, Tony Bazinski. So I'd like Tony to come up and say a few words, and then Jamie will come up. Tony?
Thank you, Bruce. Mayor Scott, Vice Mayor Wyrick, members of the board. 50 years says it all. That is the ultimate dedication. And, I can't say enough about Kenny. Whenever I needed something done, it wasn't, what time do you need me out there? As some of you remember, just one example, we had that flea market set up at Baseline in Geyer Springs every Saturday. Kenny, I need you to go out there Saturday and see what's going on. And he was out there all the time. Kenny was a pure joy to work with and very dedicated to the department, to the city organization, and to the citizens of Little Rock. City's losing a lot with Kenny leaving. So anyway, it's all about him today. So again, I was very fortunate to have worked with him for so many years, and he did a great job for the city. Thank you.
I'm going to keep this little short. Talked about the 50 years dedication. So I'm going to give you a little tidbit of some dedication, and Kenny likes to still does like try new things. When we was going to go all electronic, I went and bought iPads for all the code enforcement officers to kind of go out in the field. And I think Kenny was not in the office that day. But he come back, and when he come back in the office, I had one ready for him. And I gave it to him. I was like, we're going to start using this in the field. And his eyes got real big. And I don't know if he ran an iPad before. Definitely ran a phone like that, but not the iPad. And so over, the course of a few months, we went over some things. There was mistakes made, but he worked through all that stuff. So that just tells you, and he was using it, and he's using it today. When he gave it back to me the other day to give to somebody else's going to come position, I don't know that he shed a tear. He's giving it back. But he did use it. He did grow. He did try. And that is dedication even to something new in the department. And so I see that in him all the time, everything that's asked, as Tony said. And so I hope that he takes that to whatever endeavor he does in the future. And he looks nice. Looks like he's about to go preaching a little bit. I will. And he will be missed by everybody, I can tell you that.
And a lot of his current colleagues and former colleagues are here. If you all would stand. Scott. It is truly an honor for me to present this medallion to you for 50 years of dedicated service to the city of Little Rock. You will be greatly missed.
Thank you. Thank you, sir. Thank you so much. Okay. To our mayor, city board, city manager, I'm no stranger to standing before a public board and talking with you. I know everybody on the roster. And one lady up there used to rock me as a little boy when I was a baby. Sister Hendricks, yes. And BJ and Miss Wright and Miss Joan Adcock. We go way back. The story is I'm the reason she's on the city board. And it's been wonderful working for the citizens of this city. And I don't plan to stop. I plan to continue on in my ministry and my pastoring, telling people about thus said the Lord. And I hope everybody under the sound of my voice know who I'm talking about. And thank you all for letting me work 50 years. And I've been asked to change my mind, but my mind is made up this time. And thank God for each and every one of you. And may God bless you is my prayer.
Mr. Scott,
Yes, sir.
on behalf of the city board, we just again want to reiterate what Mr. Moore has already shared, but just let you know how much we each appreciate you and what you've given to the city of Little Rock that we can never pay back. But very grateful for the true asset that you are and that you will continue to be and continue on in your pastory. Thank you so much.
Thank you all.
Director Adcock, then Director Wright, then Director Hendricks.
Kenny. Yes, I remember standing in my driveway and saying, Mr. Scott, I'm going to run for the city board because of you. And you and I both know why. But I want to thank you. If you was the reason that I ran for this board, then I want to say thank you. But I will also want to say thank you for the many, many years that I have called and talked to you about problems, and you have always fixed them. I can never recall a time that you didn't go out and fix the problem that I had. And for that, I want to say thank you so much. I'm going to really miss you.
Thank you so much. I was enforcing on Director Adcock. And she said, I'm going to get on that city board and be your boss. Dr. Kump, and I've been knowing you a long time, Brother Richardson, and that's it. And God bless you.
Mr. Scott, hold on. We have a couple more directors want to for you.
Okay.
Director Wright.
Now, you didn't think you were going to get out of here without some of us saying something. I just want to thank you. 50 years is a long time. And to survive that long and have good relations with your colleagues is admirable. And I am most appreciative of everything that I've seen you do. And I know of all the times I've had to call you about commercial vehicles and things in the neighborhood and people were complaining about. I thank you for your responsiveness. And I also thank you for being a man in the ministry, because what you're going to be doing and what you are doing is even better than what you were doing. So that is very noble, and I'm so happy to have known you, Kenny. And I see you around a lot. And, you know, even when you don't see me, I see you. But I always got a good spirit, and that's very, very admirable quality in a human being. So thank you so much for everything that you've meant to the city of Little Rock. Okay?
Thank you. Want you all to meet my beautiful wife for 29 years, 29 years now, Irma Coney Scott. And this is my right hand, and she's been with me for when I was down and out, when I felt like giving up. I've had 2 knee surgeries where my toe knee's been replaced from playing basketball. But she has been my right hand, and I thank God for her.
Thank you so much. Mr. Scott and Mrs. Scott, may want to still, Director Hendricks, and then Director Richardson.
I'll be brief. As he has said earlier, that I did rock and nourish him when he was a boy, because his parents and I grew up together, and that's why you're what you are today. And thank you for your service.
All right.
Director Richardson.
Thank you, Mayor. We're going to let you get out of here. I know we're kind of holding you up. I just want to personally thank you for being a pillar of our community and being a role model that individuals like Bruce and Frank and I need to have in order to look for inspiration and guidance and belief that we can do anything that we can. And simply put, I just want to thank you for planting the garden that I eat from daily and digging the well that we all drink from daily. Thank you, sir, for that. And all the sacrifice that you made so we can be up here doing what we're doing.
All right.
You can go now.
Thank you so
all
much,
again.
Mr.
God
Scott.
bless you.
Next week, we will hear from Dr. Victoria Ramirez, the Executive Director of the Arkansas Arts Center, regarding the Arts Center update. We all will look forward to that. We can now proceed with the review of the proposed agenda. Board members, are there any questions from items 1 through 11? Items 1 through 11. Director Adcock?
Yes, I would like to have some information on item 3, and then 5, 6, 7, and 8. I just have one question about all 4 of them, and it's the same question.
Okay, so let's go through 5, 6, 7. What's your question?
The request, this says that we're going to sell the property to the highway department. Are we actually going to sell it for money? Are we not just going to donate it to them? Mr. Carpenter?
Mr. Carpenter?
In these, each, Mr. Carpenter, it says that we are going to sell the property to the highway department.
Director Adcock, whatever we're doing, it's been worked out as a part of the Highway 10 plan, reconstruction out there.
I'm sorry, I didn't hear you.
Whatever has been done or is being done by this resolution was worked out as a part of the extension of Highway 10, the widening of the highway.
How much money are we selling them? Because you've got item 5, 6, 7, and 8, all 4 that says we're selling property. And 9? Okay, and 9.
I don't have that number in front of me. Mr. Honeycutt might. Honeywell.
Well, I'm not against making money, but I can't imagine us selling property to the state to build a highway for the city of Little Rock. Could we have an answer by next week?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay.
We'll have that answer for you next week for 5, 6, 7, 8, and 9.
Okay, and then number 3.
And what's your question for number 3?
Okay, I would like a presentation to know why this is so high and why it looks like over the last few years that this has become so high. And I think this is another Mr. Carpenter question.
Actually, we'll first have it with our human resource, Ms. Kelly Shepard. But actually, we'll let Mr. Carpenter speak first.
Mr. Carpenter, it looked like last year it was 70,000 and this year it's 130,000. That's quite an increase.
Director Adcock, state statute requires the city to hire a separate legal counsel to represent management before the Civil Service Commission. And then it has my office represent the commission. That's the typical way it's done. That dates back to a mess that began down in Pine Bluff several years ago, and some decisions from the state Supreme Court and then subsequent statutes by the General Assembly. You never know what a year is going to bring, and HR does all they can to kind of figure out this is what it looks like it's going to be this year, but occasionally you get one that lasts longer or that is more complex. One of the cases involved in this one was a police shooting case, and it was a situation in which there was a tremendous amount of, the hearing itself lasted longer than most of them do, and the discovery in the matter was quite extensive. So that's what has led to the increases, and it's just, this is the way it happened. That happened a few years ago. I can't remember what the case was that brought it about, but we had a situation where we had 2 or 3 really contested and highly involved employment actions that also dealt with appeals to civil service and then dealt with appeals to circuit court, and we had to do the same thing at that time when the Cross Gunner Law Firm was representing the city before the commission.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Director Adcock, and we'll have those questions for you in regards to the Highway 10 improvements for 5, 6, 7, 8, and 9. Just from a previous experience, if it is a dollar amount, is very nominal, but we will have the exact numbers. Director Hines?
Tom, this goes to question number 3. Do we audit these bills from Friday Elders? Does your office audit them?
My office does not. That would be an HR question.
Yes, sir, we do audit them. We just recently met with one of the attorneys over there on some bills that we received and some of the charges, and we're able to get some of them reversed.
Okay, thank you.
Director Peck? Thank you, Ms. Shepherd.
Thank you, Mayor. Back to the Highway 10, the widening of Highway 10 from 430 to Sandpeck Road, which is like in my backyard. If you look at it, it's just like 0.05 acres, 28 square feet. But this is all just drainage easements, right, and just for tiny little parcels.
Mr. Honeywell, if you'll come address everyone, please.
Mayor, members of the board. Yes, that's true. Most of these are thin strips of property that are along the frontage of Highway 10 along these properties. For instance, I believe one of these is probably Fire Station 16, where they're having to acquire some right-of-way there and some drainage easements associated with infrastructure that they have to build. So they're, and also going with a lot of these acquisitions, since there's federal funds typically included in Highway Department projects, they are required by federal law to actually provide that compensation when they acquire property from any entity, regardless of if it's a municipal government entity or not. So there are some rules related to those funds that have to be transferred.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome. But we'll have the number. We'll be able to have the numbers for y'all next week.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Honeywell. Are there any more questions for items 1 through 11? Seeing none, we'll move now to items 12 through 14. Board members, are there any questions for items 12 through 14? Director Adcock?
Yes, item 12 on the annexation. A few years ago, we did a study on annexation, the cost of it and what advantages we would have of it. I don't recall that if this property was on that study that we did. Why are we now looking at this property? It has no housing on it. Evidently, it's up a mountain. So what is the advantages for the city of Little Rock to annex this property?
Mr. Collins, if you would, please.
And also then what would be the cost of providing services, both police and fire, to this area?
If we could bring up the zoning map for that area, that kind of see where everything is. And your first question on there was, well, what property was looked at when we look, for the extraterritorial, and the answer was it's all undeveloped or developed property outside the city limits, that would provide city services, because there is this portion of the extraterritorial is zoned So what cost would that be if that was extended? This particular property, if you look at it just to the south of it, is that's Chenal Valley Drive. So the main access to that on the south side is the city limits on the south side of this property. To the north, that is the top of the mountain. That's where all the towers are for the broadcast antennas, to kind of give everybody a little relation where it's at. So Gordon Road is the one that's running up the hill, is going up there. So yes, this is the side of a mountain of that area for that. So the main infrastructure that we're talking about for the city that's already in place would be that Chenal Valley Drive that's to the south, and the infrastructure there. Now, any development that they would do, that is the developer to do. And when this gets annexed in, or they develop the property and tie on to city services. And right now, no plans have been presented, but they have shown the intent to develop it residential. And there will be, just for topography and other means, when they do a layout, that will set the density of that development that comes in, and that infrastructure will be theirs to install on that, not the city's. So if you're talking about fire and police service right now, they're servicing the south of that area right now, the homes that are there. So the main roads are already servicing. And I can't speak for as far as the fire service areas that be there, but there is, I don't know if the chief is here, but there's an interlocal government agreement about service areas that actually go outside the city limits between the other fire, rural fire departments and everything outside of that for that service in the extraterritorial. So I can't speak for their, comments on that, but, they're already servicing that area all around it. You kind of see where the city limits has grown and been annexed all around it on the east and the west side. Only the north side hasn't been annexed in, and like I said, that's the top of the mountain, or where all the broadcast antennas are.
Okay, thank you. And I would like to, Mayor, have that study that we did maybe presented to the board at some time.
Yes, ma'am. Seeing no other questions for 12 through 14, are there any questions for 15 through 17? Director Wright?
16.
16.
What is that? An appeal procedure, what is that?
Director Wright, that's part of the booting ordinance. In order to have a booting ordinance and immobilize a vehicle because of non-payment of fines, the city has to put into effect notice procedures and an appellate procedure to the owner. And so this basically puts that into effect. It also rewrote the notice that's placed with the car that explains the processes available to the individual.
So we boot it and we put this notice on the car, and they can appeal it.
Yeah, but it's not like a court appeal. It isn't. They're booted only because the car has received tickets and the person was listed as the owner of the car. The only real defense is conceivably they had sold the car and it shouldn't have been listed in their name. That's different from my son was driving the car, which I'm quite familiar with, and I'm still responsible for the ticket, even though I graduated from the university 40 years ago. But in any event, that won't be a defense. The defense would be that they actually did not own the car when it was illegally parked.
So, but they would still have to go ahead and pay to get their car unbooted. Then they could appeal it and get their money back? Is that what
It's not necessarily they have to pay beforehand. That's the shortest and easiest way. And if they do that and then appeal and show they didn't own the car, then they would be entitled to a refund from the city. One thing they can do is they can try to see if a court will set a bond for it, or they can try to have the hearing first and make the argument that some of the tickets were not given to them when they owned the vehicle, in which case we would have to look at that. So it gives some options, though, and it also provides the hearing, and that's the important part.
Okay, thank you.
Director Adcock?
Yes, on item 17, I'd like to have Mr. Collins answer a question, please.
Yes, ma'am?
And then also, is the applicant here today?
I don't think so.
That I don't know.
I doubt it. It's
Did
just
not,
that
did
they'll
not
probably
see
be
the
here for
applicant come
board
in.
meeting.
Okay. Jamie, on the ordinance, it says under J that staff will enforce item D, E, and F. In one of these, it talks about a certain type of a requirement by the Central Arkansas Water Company. Has that been explained to this applicant?
Yes, we sit down, actually Monday, we scheduled a meeting, after my meeting Tuesday, to sit down with the applicant, explain, ensure that they understand, what this application was, some of the concerns that was raised, and to, clarify some, points brought out at the meeting. And so, that point, we did talk with them and they understood, the application and all the comments that was on there.
Did you suggest that they attend the board meeting next week?
Yes.
Because they did not attend Southwest Ups, they did not attend the neighborhood meeting, they did not attend last week, so I'd like to make sure that they're here next week.
Let me clarify that. The applicant was here last week, because I went and met with her outside, after that meeting. And that's when I started talking to her, and then we scheduled a meeting for her to come in. So some of the points that was addressed in Tuesday will be there to get back with us with their responses to that so that we can present that to the board and send that whenever we get that in. So I'm anticipating to get that in soon. And the items that we talked about were the trailer, the disposal of the tires, and the look of the building. And we went out there, staff went out, and took pictures and just observed their general operation before we had that meeting.
Since this is on two streets and the main street, you said that they was just going to dedicate right away.
That was a requirement through the review process in Public Works, and that's a typical requirement when development is not happening. They're not doing any development on the site. They're not expanding their building. They're not adding parking. They're not improving the site. This is just a recognition of the use that's there, that's been there for decades. And so at that time, and just due to the uncertainty of the timing and the actual design of when Mableville Main does get finished, that was a consideration that staff put in for the request to just right away only.
The house next door to them is real good looking. It has lots of fence, lots of shrubs and everything. Are we not requiring this business to do anything landscaping?
Landscaping wise, when the rezoning, it has to do with what they disturb and what they have to come up with in compliance with the landscaping. So that's part of that development and improvement of the building, and improvement in, and that when they applied for it for the planned development, that was not a criteria that was set, for that, because there was no improvements that was being made. If they had come in and done a certain percentage of improvement of the building, then that kicks in a pro rata form of improvement up to a certain, full improvement. If they was tearing down the building in its entirety, we actually had that come before the board not very long ago. If you remember the gas station at the northeast corner of Shackelford and Markle, where they actually raised the entire building and built it back. Well, they come back with the plan development, and they had to adhere to all the landscape ordinances and codes, and where they couldn't adhere to, then they had requests for variances through that process.
But this business is one of those that you can just pull off any place off of the street. It doesn't have a designated drive into the business or anything like that, so it really doesn't look good.
And I can express what we talked with the applicant about in our meeting was the access to the property, just how the operation is handling on the property, the location of the dumpster that's out there, the existing dumpster, and just the general looks of it and the trailer storage of where that trailer would be. Now, the looks of all that is handled through our zoning code enforcement. Typically when the board approves a rezoning of a property, it's not typically put in there that make sure you pick this stuff up and this stuff is placed there. That's general zoning code enforcement that we already have authority to do so, which we have been out there to to the property to cite them for the just placement of tires out on the property, you know, in the deal. So in what we talked with and, you know, and when the applicant comes back and provides us, you know, for that, then we will present the list of stuff that we talked with and the answers back to the board, you know, for the meeting next Tuesday. Today, I don't have that. I could not present it. When I get it, I will forward it to Laura, and she can send it to the board so y'all can see it the minute that I get it.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Collins, if you come right back, I think Vice Mayor Wyrick will have a question.
My question is about storage. You showed us a sketch of the property last week, and the same sketch is in here this week, and there's no designated storage, which is one of my big issues with the property. Are they going to amend the sketch to reflect where their storage is supposed to be? And how they're gonna deal with their dead tires that they get from their work?
That should be part of the stuff that we're presenting back to the board, you know, for the meeting on Tuesday. When we get those, the sketch that the board sees is one that is prepared by us. So when we get that location, we talked about several areas that they to place this and how to do that. And when we get that back from them, you know, we will put that on there and present it to the board.
I guess my issue is this has been through the planning commission, and they approved it, and then you submitted it to the board without any storage locations on here. And, you know, here we go again, the meeting's on Tuesday, and we still don't have storage. So that's one of my key issues with this whole design for this property. So if we don't have a designated storage where it's in a fashion that is not unsightly to the public, then I'm still going to have a no vote for this. So I hope that you impress upon them that that's very important to this location and approval.
We have made that known, and then, like I said, when we receive that, we will forward it as soon as we get it.
Thank you.
Any more questions for number 17? Seeing none, next week we will have a public hearing dealing with the abandonment of the right-of-way adjacent to Van Buren Street for item number 18. Are there any questions? Seeing none, this meeting is now adjourned. We're getting ready to go back into another meeting. We're now opening our policy discussion meeting. The meeting is now being started. Chief Hubbard, if you would, please approach to discuss the burn ban.
Good evening, Mayor, members of the board. I was asked to do some research on our burn ban ordinance. As it stands now, the procedure for obtaining a burn permit, just to even be permissible in this community of Little Rock, you would have to come to Central Fire Station, or you can do it online and obtaining your burn permit. That's for the residents as well as the commercial business owners or developers. Let me say that. Let's call them developers. And for a residential fee, it's $5 to obtain that permit. For commercial, it's $250 for 30 days and $350 for 90 days. If it's commercial, which is the developers, prior to them starting any type of burns, one of our fire marshals would have to go out and inspect the area, ensure that they have identified the individuals who will be monitoring all activity when they do start their burn process. As far as residential, there is no pre-inspection prior to them burning. As of 2019, we issued 994 burn permits for residents of this community. and we issued approximately 100 commercial burn permits for one calendar year. Due to that, and then they're given the information as far as what's permissible to burn and what's not permissible to burn when they obtain this permit. So through over the last 5 years, we've only revoked 11 of those burn permits. 3 commercial and 8 residential. And that was due to some citizen, some member of the community, called 911, complained of issue with the individual burning, and we come out and we either cited them and revoked their burn permit, or else we investigated and found there was no issue when we went out. There was, in 2019 also, we received 295 calls to go check for burning issues, open burning issues in the community. So that's approximately less than 1% of our calls where we actually responded to burning concerns from members of the community. Many of the times, the people that come in, they obtain the burn permits, they follow the rules. What we have also that we have to address is the individuals who are not, who have not obtained the proper burn permits, who are not aware of what they can and cannot burn. Those are the members that we have to address, sometimes on a daily basis. Yes.
Thank you, Mr. Hubbard. Chief Hubbard, Director Richardson.
It's not a question for him, Mayor, so if someone else has a question for him, I defer. But my issue is on something else, so if someone else has a question for him, mine is not for Chief Hubbard.
All right. Next in line is Director Wright.
My question is not on the burn ban.
All right. Director Adcock.
Chief, a gentleman came before us that lives over in the Oak Forest area. And his problem was that his neighbors burn. He has a health problem. And his neighbors burn, and the smoke comes over in his yard and makes him sick. And we have other people that have health problems and everything. Is there any limit to how much you can burn or how long you can burn?
So, thank you. As far as the amount, there is no defined weight amount or size amount. It's only thing that a resident could burn, if we're talking residents here, is shrubbery, grass clippings, things of that nature.
Well, he says that they do it for like a week at a time every day. So we have no time limit on how long they can burn?
Yes. So the time limits on that is prior to a person starting their burns, if they're following policy here, they would have to notify our communications bureau that they're burning. And then they have to have it shut off by sunset.
Okay.
By sunset. You should not be burning all day, all night. That's not permissible.
Okay. And on the commercial ones, the complaints on that was out in the Bowman Curve, or Bowman area.
Yes.
Where they are burning large amounts of trees whenever they're clear cutting ground. Is there any limits to how many days they can do that and how many trees they can burn at a time?
By this current policy, no, there is no limitations on that.
Did you check to see if other cities have limits on that?
No, I will. I'll follow up with you on that.
Okay, and someone had sent me some, evidently Arkansas laws pertaining to burns.
Yes.
And I think I gave you that last week when you
Yes.
requested it. Do we cover everything that the state has in this requirement?
By this, it says to set forth enforcement options. I think we addressed that pretty well.
Okay.
I will speak to the developers. They do an excellent job of doing the right thing, having someone ensuring that they're following all the proper procedures. What happens with many of the developers, the initial burn starts off very toxic to the environment, I will say that, because there's so much smoke, but they have to get the heat up to a certain temperature, then you see no more smoke anymore. If you drive by many of their sites, you can see the embers burning underneath, but there's no smoke generated anymore, and that's what they're trying to reach. But that initial the initial burning, when it starts, it does create quite a bit of smoke into the community. That is a concern. But they do a great job.
Do you feel that our laws are fair to both the commercial people but also to the residents?
To the residents who abide by the rules, yes. We have many that don't follow the rules, that don't obtain the burn permits, who are not burning the appropriate permissible things.
What
And
is the
those are the ones,
fine?
if you notify us, we come out and we cite those individuals and try to get them into court, environmental court, to try to correct that behavior.
What is the fine if you burn without a permit?
I would have to follow with you on that.
Okay. Okay, thank you.
All right, Director Hendricks.
Well, Chief, if we did put a limit to trees, is that enforceable? I mean, we'll have to have somebody out there count the trees, or if they burned out. I mean, how? If we had some kind of legislation like that, would that be enforceable for you and your department? Would we literally have to have someone out there counting the trees, or somebody go through the piles and say, well, that was a tree, that was a half a tree? How? I mean, to help me understand that.
But offer is challenges.
Thank you, sir.
Director Hendricks.
I want to thank the chief for, I call it demolishing the burned house in the 1900 block of Martin Luther King. It had been standing too long, and thank you.
Thank you, ma'am.
Director Hines.
Chief, thanks. Director Adcock, and I appreciate you giving the hours of burning. I've done a little investigation and been contacted by several of our larger developers. In Ward 5, we tend to have more of that development. We've got more open space, open ground. They did point out to me that in the city of North Little Rock, they allow commercial burns to continue straight through without the startup and tamp down like we require, since you can only go sun up to sunset. They allow, North Little Rock allows their commercial burns to burn 24 hours as long as the contractor has somebody on site 24 hours to monitor. And what the chief was getting at is what you see, the smoke that's offensive is when they start up. And so we're causing our developers to have, when you start up or when you put the fire out, it causes a lot of smoke because they usually got to dump dirt on it. What is getting burned in Ward 5? The developers out there log those clear cuts. They're not burning whole trees. What they are burning are the stumps and the treetops, the leafy vegetation. There's value when a developer in that wood that comes off of there, it goes to lumber mills. It's put in. It's not, when you see something clear cut, that's going into a tree's life cycle. It's still, use a popular term, that carbon is still sequestered. It's going into furniture, to lumber, to pulp, to make paper. But that's something that we might want to look at, that since the smoke is really the issue, and like you said, once they get the temperature hot enough, you don't get any smoke. It's on the startup, and then when you have to put the fire out, you come in the next morning, you got to start the fire back up. And so I think maybe that's something to reduce the impact as far as smoke. We may want to look at something on the commercial side. I can tell you what does concern me is the amount of residential burn in the city, because I didn't realize we could get a burn permit as a resident to burn, and the fact that we only charge $5. I get it that in some areas of our city that are a little more rural. Director at Wyrick. Yeah, I think it's probably appropriate to be able to burn there, but I sure as heck wouldn't want one of my neighbors burning next door to me. We're in fairly tight quarters. As with anything, and it does give me concern that somebody's burning for 5 straight days in a residential setting. That tells me they're probably burning something more than just yard clippings and leaves. Because we burn down at the Duck Club, and it don't take any time at all to burn off some leaves and stuff. So, and maybe that's something we can look. But I feel pretty confident because what would happen in West Little Rock in Ward 5 is if we didn't allow them to burn the stumps and treetops, that means they either have to grind them, which means they've got to haul them off someplace to be ground, or they have to haul them off and they get buried outside the city limits someplace, but that puts truck traffic, heavy equipment on our city streets. So to me, the economical thing to see maybe we can address the smoke issue on startup and tamp down is something that maybe we want to take a look at going forward.
Sure.
Thank you.
Director Wright,
Mine is not on the burn ban.
we're now,
Okay.
the meeting, just so, we are now finished with the burn ban, so if there are any additional questions, please go now, or we're going to be adjourning our
Okay.
policy discussion.
Well, my questions are coming from a constituent who had questions about how we have communicated to the public about the new rules in Public Works. They want to know what work they can find the new rules, that after you get one free pickup a year or
Yes,
something?
ma'am, and there'll be a communication plan that's currently being worked on right now, that will be sent out. I do know, our communications, folks have been working with Public Works to get that all lined out so it can be, easily, understood.
Okay.
And so-
Also, too, the next other question was regarding the recycling, and the question was, what violations would result in removal of your recycling bin? The person that was asking was a neighborhood president, and they did not know what that would actually constitute.
What do you, you have to,
What type of violation, what would I be able to put in there that would make Public Works come and take my recycling bin?
I don't know of anything. There may be some specific, if Mr. Honeywell will let us know that.
Well, but that's what the question was, and they need an answer.
I think you can make that part of the communication that's going to go out, but I'll be happy to try to at least give a brief response
and
to
then
that.
put something out.
There's not a particular contaminant that we're looking for that's going to cause us to want to remove someone's recycle bin. We're looking to do that action only if someone is a habitual contaminator of their recycle bin, where it's out there on the street all the time and it's obvious it's got contamination in it, garbage, plastic bags, stuff that's been tagged by Waste Management as being contaminated. So let's say Waste Management goes by someone in that particular person's neighborhood and doesn't pick up a recycle bin because it's contaminated. They tag that cart so the person is made aware that it has contaminants in it. 2 weeks later, they come by. They're going to check that cart to see if the contaminants have been removed before they dump it. They want to make sure that they're doing everything they can to keep contamination out of their recycle stream. Now, if that cart just stays out multiple times after that, that's when we have to come involved, because Waste Management is not going to pick it up because it's
Right.
contaminated. That's when we would become involved, come out and take that bin if it's been out for cycles longer, probably than 2 cycles. We're going to say this is contaminated. The person's had 4 weeks at this point to do something about the contamination. They obviously are not going to do anything. So we're going to come dump the cart and take it, and they'll have the opportunity to get it back, but that's where that $50 fine comes in to get the cart back at that point. Because they haven't made the effort to not contaminate their cart, and it's been out on the street at
Now,
that
this is not a new procedure. This is our current procedure.
It's what we could do right now,
Right
is
now.
based on the ordinance that we
And
have.
we're not
yes.
changing that.
No, that's part of this new, what started January 1.
Okay. And when do you anticipate getting the communications out?
That's what the mayor just mentioned a minute ago. That's,
Yeah,
the
I don't know.
communications team is working on that.
Don't know.
Hopefully it'll be this week, yes.
Okay. Maybe hopefully start of February.
We have not actually done that at this point.
Okay.
We haven't collected a card at this point that I'm aware of.
Okay.
Director Richardson?
Yes, thank you, Mayor. A couple of quick questions for Bruce and Tom, and possibly even you. Excuse me. So since we're in the policy part of our meeting, Bruce, I know I asked for a request for a disparity study, and I just got it, and I haven't had a chance to digest it. And it seems like the last time we've done a disparity study was back in 2012. Is that correct?
No, Director Richardson, I think what you're looking at is sort of a summary our Minority Economic Development Director did at that point, because we were starting to kind of review it. I think it was done more in the late 90s, to be honest.
That's a long time ago. I'm looking at this. It looks like it's couched and framed within the framework of the small business program we used to run here. And is there not a periodic time frame that we do these? And do we have any goals with respect to minority contractors? And the third part of that question is, what's our percentage of minority contractors and the amount to go along with those percentages? So do we have any kind of internal goals to increase minority contract with the city of Little Rock? And how often do we do these disparity studies? Because I'm glad you mentioned that this is really not the disparity study. And the last one we did was in the 90s, which was 20 plus years ago.
Director, I'm going to jump in on a few of those questions. One of the things that I shared while campaigning and wanted to implement during my tenure is some new goals as it relates to women and minority business spending within the city of Little Rock. At the State of the City, I'll be sharing those new goals that are a lot larger than what we've done in the past to set an aspirational goal for us to achieve from that standpoint. Secondly, one of the things that Mr. Moore and I have been working on, because many people sometimes advocate for a set-aside, and so you can't necessarily do a set-aside from a state perspective. Many people get confused on what goes on from a federal government, because the federal government does have set-asides, but from a state perspective and a municipality perspective, you cannot unless there's a disparate impact study. And so we've been researching disparate impact studies, and they come to the tune of $500,000 to really do a detailed and comprehensive one. And that's something that was not accounted for in the budgeting process, but something that we can, as we look through different things, maybe possibly bring that back before the board for consideration. But again, due to that large number, we want to make sure that the board is seeing that. But to get your end goal, we have to first have a disparate impact study.
Well, yeah, and I'm glad you clarified that, because I think that whenever I raise this issue, it gets framed or couched as a set-aside or a quota, and that's not necessarily what we're talking about. I'm talking about incentives, and I'm talking about goals. And I know, Tom, from a legal standpoint, we can't do that until we do a disparity study, if I'm understanding this correctly, what the mayor just referenced. I'm not talking about set-asides, I'm not talking about quotas, I'm talking about incentives and goals for us internally to look at increasing our minority contracting with city contracts.
Director Richardson, the disparity study deals with set-asides basically only. You can set goals and ambitions without having a disparity study. You cannot put in a situation where somebody is disqualified because they don't meet the goal or ambition under state bidding laws. That's what the difference is.
And that's the reason why we're going to set this new goal that we'll share Thursday to speak to exactly what you've been referencing.
Well, I appreciate that, Mayor, and I think that part of the problem has been, and this is not coincidental, I think part of the problem is some of the minority business don't necessarily have the capacity to fill some of the contracts that we have available, and I don't know what we're doing to put in place to help build capacity at the small business level to make them more likely or make them more able to compete for some of these contracts, so that we can, in fact, increase the minority contracting in our community. I think it's really, really important, man. I'm glad it's one of your goals, and it's certainly one of my desires, one of my wishes and goals as well. The next part of my question, Tom, I know you and I have had some conversations back and forth, and if I can get you to give me a summary based on the MOUs you've sent me and our email exchanges, a summary of what it would take for us to get the inclusion of the BPOA and the black firefighters in our collective bargaining process. What process and what limitations do we have with respect to the inclusion of the black firefighters and the Black Police Officers Association as part of the bargaining unit for firefighters and police officers, because not everyone belongs to the ones that are at the table right now.
Director Richardson, the city is able to recognize a bargaining unit if it wishes to do so. And historically, we have recognized FOP and IAFF for police and fire, and then more recently, and I don't remember exactly when, ASME was represented for non-uniform municipal workers who are union eligible. From the research I've done, there's nothing that would prohibit the board from saying, we want a bargaining unit to be X and we want representatives from these groups to be there.
Well, I guess you answered the last part of my question. It would require board action.
Right, because unless there is a board indication that they wish to have a bargaining unit, there's no requirement to actually deal with the bargaining unit.
So that can't be done from a door's perspective, from the mayor's office and the manager's office in your office. It has to have some kind of, has to be codified up here.
Well, I don't know that it has to be codified because I had never been able to find a resolution when we first represented, I think it was the Little Rock Police Officers Association was the initial entity that the city did negotiations with. In terms of whether the mayor could do it unilaterally, I hadn't really looked at that question. It is an executive function. So I would think as long as the board didn't issue an edict, we will not have a bargaining unit, then I think it is something the mayor might be able to do.
Well, thank you. I would like in the inclusion of that process, obviously I want the path of least resistance, but I want it to be legal and fair and conducive to the mayor and manager, how we're trying to move our city forward. As we look at the interests of all people that are involved with our city function. So obviously I want the path of least resistance, but I want it to be legal and I want it to be fair. And I want it to be just for everybody that's involved. So if I can get that memo, I appreciate that. I know I've been bugging you about it for the last couple of weeks, but I think it's something I want to share with my colleagues. And as we look at Mayor growing our city as a whole, as you said about some of your goals and kind of tying these actions and activities into some of your goals to really change the look, the feel of the city of Little Rock. And I think that there's some growing we can do and need to do. I think part of that growing is emanating from your goals and your vision. I think some of it is coming from us up here individually and in some cases with some issues collectively, but I think we need to look at that and figure out a way to move our city forward. So if you can, the small minority business contracting piece, Bruce, Mayor, if we can talk about that or look at that and get something in writing on that. And Tom, the summary on the inclusion of the BPOA and the black firefighters in our negotiations.
Vice Mayor Wyatt.
Thank you, Mayor. A couple of things are on my mind tonight. The street projects that were funded through the penny sales tax, I'm not sure where we are, but I think those projects have to be completed by June of 2020. And am I right about that?
Which phase did you mention? The second phase?
Yeah.
I think that's obviously our goal.
Well, let me tell you why I'm bringing this up. I got a new high school
We-
that's going in on Mableville Pike, and they're about finished with it, and we haven't started on the street. Now, I know we've worked on right-of-way, but they're going to be ready to open that school up this year. And I want to make sure that that street and that roundabout are completed in time for them to move into that school and those kids to circle around on that roundabout to get to school. And it's we've got a water line that's going in right now, and the yards along that street are a mess. And I don't know if when we did the road plans, we made provisions to make sure that those front yards are not flooded, because some of them are right now today. So I want to make sure that we do something in regards to that. But my main goal is that we have that street ready for school opening. It's going to be very embarrassing if we don't. But I'd like to know what. Yay, we're together. Okay, do you have any idea when we're talking about being completed?
By that day.
By, I would think you'd need it ready before school opening.
We'll have it done before the school opens, is what Director Honeywell is sharing.
Okay, I'm worried about it. I
We
really
wanted to make
am.
sure that the building got done first.
Oh, please, you know it's going to get done. My second thing has to do with, Joan brought up the extraterritorial study. My brother Heinz and I put together a couple of resolutions where we wanted the sewer, water, and then all the city services studied in the extraterritorial boundary. And we've not had a readout from that, but when we have an annexation come before us, I would think we could use that study as a guide to know what the impact is going to be for the city. I think I learned from the study that residential does not pay for the services. The taxes from them do not pay for the services that we provide upon annexation. We have to have businesses and apartments and those kinds of things in order to do it. But I would think that if you brought a annexation to us, you would be able to tell us something about that annexation and the impact on the city. Years ago, when we did all the annexations out west, everybody that came before us said no impact, no impact, no impact. And I think we need to know what the real deal is before we do these types of votes on annexation. So that study was done in 2017. Yep. And almost a year and a half later, we still haven't had a readout. We had focus groups that came together and talked about it, and they were really wanting to know what the readout was going to be, and we still haven't done it. So I'm hopeful that, Mayor, you'll get it on our agenda so we'll at least know what that looks like. And hopefully we can use it as a tool going forward in our city
This is
for
an ETG
annexations.
study. When was this done? This was before me.
2017.
17.
Yeah.
We'll figure it out. Thank you. Director Adcock?
Yes, Mayor. Starting March the 15th to April the 18th, West Central Community Center and Southwest Community Center are going to be open for the first time for people to fill out their census online or by phone. For every person not counted, it's going to cost this city $3,000 a person, or over 10 years, $30,000. So for every one that we miss in this census, there's a cost to us as a city. We have not heard anything about the census very much, although other cities in our states have plans. They have babies' onesies. Every baby born in Fort Smith has received a new onesie that says, "Count me." Children are walking around with shirts that says, "Please count me." All the vehicles in the city of Fort Smith has decals on them that says, "Please, let's count you," or something. So there's 20 languages in Fort Smith that's being looked at for the census. I would like for this board to know what our plan is, what we're doing, so that when we come to counting people, that we're not losing $30,000 a person because we didn't count. Also, Mayor, there is in the Hispanic community, there's some questions. One question is that you can drive by some houses in the evening, and there's 6-8 cars in front of a house. Those cars did not get there by themselves. People drove those cars. So we know people are living in those houses. Our ordinance says that you can only have 4 people that are not kin living in the same house. So in the Hispanic community, they're asking, is the material that they submit to the census going to be available then to the City of Little Rock code officers to do enforcement? And so that is something we need to probably discuss and understand. Also, we have lots of children in school, and they're wanting to make sure that we count the children because of the funding going to the schools. But there again, there's some questions in the Latino community. So I would like to request that in 2 weeks that we have a complete understanding of where we are on a plan for the city of Little Rock and what we're going to do. Because if we wait, if we're going to start this on March the 15th, 2 more weeks, we're going to be into February, and then we only have 1 month to plan and to order stuff that we want. Other cities are doing yard signs, they've got the decals, they're doing T-shirts, they're doing all kinds of things to make people understand we need to count everyone.
You are totally correct, and that's why next week we'll have a press announcement of our complete count committee that's already been assembled. So our team has been working since the last 2 or 3 months on everything. We've been attending every Arkansas Census 2020 meeting, so we're very well versed in all the dates. That's the reason why you have the date that you have on the March 15th, because there was some work done to get to that point. So you will have next week the Arkansas Complete Count Committee that'll share all that information moving forward. So all of it, and so all of that.
We have heard from
Director Adcock, I'm just trying to complete. We will have all the information that you are desiring. We wanted to first have the complete count committee assembled. There was a lot of staff work that's already been done prior to that.
Okay, thank you. We want to make sure that people cannot say, I cannot get online to be counted, because we're going to be sitting at West Central and
It's
Southwest.
a priority for the city of Little Rock to make sure every person's counted.
I would also like for you to consider Dunbar with that, because we have lots of people in the inner city that needs to have a place to go.
I think we got all that covered, Director Adcock. But if you would like to be a part of the team, we can get you a part of the team as well.
Okay, thank you.
All right. Yes, ma'am. Director Hendricks.
Thank you. I just want to sort of follow up. I sat here and listened to BJ talk about her complaints. And this week I did talk to John Honeywell and Mr. Moore and the mayor. Please take care of Martin Luther King Drive. It's a disgrace on the 1900 block. Soon.
Thank you so much. Director Richardson.
Yes, Mayor. I think that, and I'm waiting, eagerly awaiting the city's plan for the census. We know the implications of counting, making sure everyone counts. And this will be probably the first and only time you hear me say Ward 2, Ward 2, Ward 2. But what I have been doing is reaching out to community-based organizations to go out and be prepared to do the census counting for us, since Ward 2 is one of our poorest wards in the city. It's one of the wards where we have the most disconnected adults and families, and I think that there are some of the things that we can do based on the contacts we have up here, as you just said, to join your team and be a part of that, because it is certainly important for us to make sure everyone is counted as a city and as ward directors as well. I think that has some serious implications with respect to resources that we have available, and it's important for each ward to have an accurate count. As Bruce, I anticipate some more ward boundaries changing like they did in 2010, and they're going to possibly change in 2020 based on the count. So I think it's important for each of us, ward directors, Ward 2 director in particular, to make sure everybody in my ward is counted. And thank you, Mayor, for
Thank you, Director Richardson. Director Webb.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And just one more quick follow-up on that. We talked about this at our Vanguard Cities meeting a couple of weeks ago about making sure that the folks who are living in the homeless camps are being counted. And I don't know if there's somebody from our group on the census committee, but if there's not, I hope that, maybe Emily or Scott or somebody who's been working with us has input into that, so we can make sure those folks are counted.
They are.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any more questions? Seeing none, this meeting is adjourned.
All right.